The topic for our today's discussion will be panchayats. We will start off first with the history of panchayats as it has evolved over centuries in India and topping it off with the theoretical ideas regarding panchayat of one of the most strongest advocates of panchayat, Mahatma Gandhi. And in the second part, we will discuss the modalities of panchayat, which means its composition, structure and functions, with specific emphasis on two aspects. One is Gram Sabha and other will be PISA, the Panchayat Extension Act. What does panchayat mean? Panchayat is actually a Sanskrit word, a combination of two words. Panch, as you all know, stands for 5. Ayat comes from another root word in Sanskrit, ayatanam, which means office. So, taken together, panchayat would mean an office of 5 people. Now, who are these 5 people and what this office is about? These 5 people are usually the eldest and the wisest among the dwellers of a particular village or village community, and this combination of 5 people holding an office, which together is known as the panchayat, was looking after all aspects of the rural life and for acting for the development of rural life, and often also acting as a court of justice for them. And references to such practices can be found as early as in the days of the Rig Veda, which is about 1000 to 1200 years before Christ. We also found references in Manu Samhita, Dharma Shastras, in Jataka tales, in Shanti Parva of Mahabharata, and also elaborate discussion in Arthashastra by Kautilya, which of course a much later text. The practice was that a village was called a grama, and the village headman, or one who headed the whole village power structure, was Gramin, and this Gramin was held by a Sabha. This Sabha was a kind of an assembly which was composed of people representing all sections of village society and elected by the village people themselves. This Sabha, headed by the 5 wisest people at the panchayat, looked after every single aspect. It has both executive powers and legislative powers, sometimes acted as a court. It has enough taxation powers, and they raised taxes for not only for local developmental purposes, also raised taxes which would be paid on behalf of the village to the king. So, in that way this practice continued for many centuries over the Maurya Empire, the Gupta Empire, and also during Harshavardhan's. Sher Shah Suri divided the entire administration into 2 aspects. One was revenue administration and gave it the charge of this administration to an individual called Patwari, and police administration, the charge was given to an individual holding office called Muqaddam, and also the tax collection on behalf not only of one village but a number of villages was given to another person who held the office of a Zagirdar. So, a combination of a Patwari, Muqaddam and a Zagirdar effectively undermined the age old panchayat system of governance or system of local governance in rural areas. But panchayat was not dissolved, it remained maybe not as effective as previously, but it did continue to function because as we know, the Mughal rulers did not much interfere with the local practices and local institutions. They are basically interested in 2 aspects. One was enough tax collection and other was maintaining law and order. Now, the first fundamental I would say onslaught against this panchayat system came with the coming into India of the British East India Company. When the British East India Company was given the Diwani after the Battle of Plassey, they almost totally cut the base from the feet of panchayat system, and they also created two positions. One was a patwari, the name continues, and this time patwari was in charge of land and land records, not only one village, maybe of a number of nearby villages, and there was created an office of magistracy under magistrate to look after the law and order problems, and actual charge was given to a newly created post called Daroga. Literature of the period effectively tells us that these two people, one a patwari and other the Daroga, were heavily feared by the village people, and between them they control the entire village power structure. 1857 mutiny, though actually could not succeed in the sense of victory over the British forces, but gave British forces a very rude jolt, and at least proved one fundamental thing, that this British East India Company was totally out of sync with the local people of India. So, it is a huge gap between the local people and the British East India Company, busy as they were only with their tax collection endeavours. Following year, in the 1858, with the Government of India Act of 1858, Britain took over India as a direct colony, and India came under the direct rule of British Crown, which was then worn by Queen Victoria. And this did bring about a train of events which would ultimately, as we would see as we come nearer and nearer to the independence in 1947, was a restoration of the panchayat system, or in a much bigger perspective, restoration and strengthening of the local self-governance system, both at the municipal level, which means urban level, and also at the rural level. And there is a series of acts and resolutions coming post 1858, starting with Lord Mayo's resolution in 1870. And Lord Mayo, of course, he was not thinking about the rural self-governance, he was concerned with urban self-governance, but Lord Mayo insisted on local care and supervision over fund management for local social welfare and local developmental purposes. Following on Lord Mayo's 1870 resolution came what is known as the Magna Carta of local self-governance, Lord Ripon's resolution of 1882. Ripon too was interested in municipalities or the urban local governance systems, but he had a much broader view, and one of its basic reasons or objectives behind an advocacy of a stronger local governance system was that this system could give people enough political education by involving them in participating in policy making at the local level. We are talking about the twin resolutions of Lord Mayo and Lord Ripon, though we mentioned that both of them aimed primarily at the urban sector or the urban local governance. Specifically regarding rural local governance came the next important step. In 1907, a Royal Commission on Decentralization was appointed under the chairmanship of C.E.H. Hobhouse, and this Royal Commission on Decentralization specifically suggested a revival of the village panchayat system, so that the benefits of local self-governance can also be experienced and enjoyed by the village people. And this was the first direct reference to panchayats under British rule and for revival of panchayats under British rules more specifically. Interestingly, in 1919, following closely on the Royal Commission report in 1907, in 1919 first came the Montagu-Chelmsford reforms, the terms of which were incorporated into the Government of India Act of 1919. and the 1919 Act for the first time transferred the local self-governance from the hands of the district official who was unelected to a ministry headed by an elected Indian minister. The change was definitely at the psychological level, and that emboldened both provinces under the British administration as well as certain native states to go in for Panchayat Acts, and we find that following 1919 Act, from between 1925 and 1926, in 1 year, 8 provinces and 6 native states made their Panchayat Acts and established their Panchayat systems. So, we can find a very direct link, in that sense, a direct link between the Government of India Act and the preceding Royal Commission report on decentralization into the revival of the Panchayat system, which was for all practical purposes obsolete or irrelevant. And the process continued till we came to the 1935 Government of India Act, which specifically transferred local governance to the provincial domain, which means there are 2 lists, one list for the national government, one for the provincial government, and it is transferred to the provincial level. And coupled with the rising movement for national liberation, the spirit of patriotism, nationalism, panchayats really did started coming back in the villages of India, and it would be a bit ironic to say or to comment that this revival was done at the initiative and insistence of foreign rulers, and till we come to 1946 and then to 1947, our eventual independence. As you all know that Constituent Assembly, which was given the task of drawing up a constitution for the free India, started functioning from end 1946 and functioned till November 1949. And we would come to that in a more detailed fashion bit later on, but suffice it to mention at this stage that Mahatma Gandhi, who was still living then, was a very strong advocate of the Panchayat Raj system. But the leading members of the Constituent Assembly, led by the chairman of the drafting committee, Baba Saheb Ambedkar, they were staunchly against giving Panchayat or reviving the Panchayat Raj system or sharing any power with them. Ambedkar was in this sense quite forthright in his opinion that Panchayat, the villages of India in 1940s and the time we are talking about, are all centers of ignorance, illiteracy, superstition and all kinds of obscurantist ideas, and if we give such villages political power through their panchayats, then that would be a great obstacle to the development of a modern India. So, almost as a lip service to Gandhi's ideas and Constituent Assembly gave a token representation to the issue of panchayat by including panchayat within the directive principles of state policy, we call them DPSP, and article 40 of the directive principles of state policy. For those who are uninitiated in Indian constitution, the directive principles are directive principles, they are recommendatory, they are not obligatory. And this was the beginning of the modern India, the new constitution in which panchayats did not find a place. But it was found at least after the end of the first 5-year plan in 1957 that there is a vital gap somewhere, gap that planning needs a lot of not just execution, but a lot of information, a lot of local feelings have to be taken into account, and definitely popular participation for its success. So, it was replaced by a new kind of thing called the community development program, which created the office of the block development officer, and the whole of India was divided into thousands of blocks and that was the level at which the community development program would take place, involving the people of that particular block, and the responsibility is given to the newly created post of the BDO or the block development officer. But it was found out within a year or two that this entire system of the community development program failed in the most important respect, that it could not involve people, it could not draw the people into the local developmental activities. And to study the problems of this CDP, the development program, in 1957 the government of India appointed what is known as the Balwant Rai Mehta Committee. Balwant Rai Mehta Committee in its recommendation categorically stated that this community development program should be scrapped. There is no way it can be improved upon, and on the other hand argued strongly for a democratic decentralization and called for a revival of a 3-tier panchayat system at the district level, at the intermediate block level, and at the village level, and resources should be transferred to this panchayat system for effective functioning as units of local self-governance. In 1977, Morarji Desai came into power following the defeat of Srimati Indira Gandhi, and this new government of Morarji Desai appointed Ashok Mehta Committee once again for this panchayats, and Ashok Mehta Committee suggested that in place of a 3-tier system there should be a 2-tier system, and otherwise accepted all the other recommendations of the Balwant Rai Mehta Committee. The important two new suggestions were that political parties should be allowed to compete in panchayat elections came from this Mehta Committee recommendation, and also Mehta Committee strongly advocated a constitutional recognition should be given to the entire panchayat system. Unfortunately, the ministry of Morarji Desai did not last long, and naturally none of the recommendations of the Ashok Mehta Committee could be put to use in that sense. It was followed in 1985 by G.V.K. Rao Committee on decentralization, and Rao Committee recommendations was not much detailed, but it also called for a constitutional recognition and called for resource transfer to the panchayats. When Rajiv Gandhi came to power following the death of Indira Gandhi in 1984, in 1985 Rajiv appointed Singhvi Committee of 1985-86 on decentralization, and Singhvi Committee suggested enough resources for the panchayats, and also suggested that for a cluster of villages there should be a Nyaya Panchayat, meaning some kind of a judicial body at the local level. And ultimately during Narasimha Rao's prime ministership post 1991, the 72nd and 73rd amendment bills were introduced, which later became 73rd and 74th Amendment Acts. The 73rd Amendment Act dealt entirely with the panchayat system, and from this 73rd Amendment Act a new part 9 was added to the constitution starting from article 243, and it called for the compulsory establishment of a 3-tier panchayat system in every state of India. Now, if we come to what was idea, or what were the ideas of the strongest advocate of the panchayat system in India, that was Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, and though it was not till the 73rd Amendment Act, Gandhi's ideas were not at all accepted by the government of India, but we can see what Gandhi meant by his, or why he did support the panchayat system, and most of his writings on panchayats were scattered mainly in the Harijan Patrika, a journal published by Gandhi himself, and also in Hind Swaraj. Gandhi's basic idea was that Gandhi was totally for a decentralized political structure, the nature of the centralized colonial structure against which he was fighting for national liberation made him turn against the centralization of all political power, because he felt the more power is centralized, the more it becomes powerful and more it becomes forceful, and chances of violence are also rise in a manifold manner. So, we all know that non-violence is one of Gandhi's important creeds. So, from the non-violence point of view, he talked about not a centralized political system, but a decentralized political system, and to him the basis or the basic unit of the free India, the Republic of India, should be gram or village, and he called them village republics. His ideas was a bit in a way backward looking, that he was thinking of some kind of an ideal village life which was effectively contested by Ambedkar and others in the Constituent Assembly. The village life was not so ideal as Gandhi used to think, but since Gandhi was moving in some kind of a theoretical plane or sometimes also in the spiritual plane, he believed in the ideal village life and called for village republics to be the basic units of the larger Indian Republic. Now, allow me to quote from him. He writes, "Every village has to become a self-sufficient republic," and that was in 1922. He went on regarding what should be the nature of the village republic. Quote, and this is also from his writings in Harijan. Gandhi writes, "My idea of village Swaraj is that it is a complete republic, independent of its neighbors for its own vital wants, and yet interdependent for many others in which dependence is necessary." He goes on, "Thus every village's first concern will be to grow its own food crops and cotton for cloth. It should have a reserve for its cattle, recreation and playground for adults and children. Then if there is more land available, it will grow more useful money crops, excluding ganja, tobacco, opium and the like. The village will maintain a village theatre, school and public hall. It will have its own waterworks ensuring clean water supply. Education will be compulsory up to the final basic course. As far as possible, every activity will be conducted on the cooperative basis. There will be no castes such as we have today, their graded untouchability. Non-violence with this technique of satyagraha and non-cooperation with the sanction of the village community. There will be compulsory service of village guards who will be selected by rotation from the register maintained by the village." It is a sufficient detailed picture of what his ideal village republic should be. But where does the institution of panchayat fit into this village republic? Once again we turn to Gandhi for that, and I quote, "The government of the village will be conducted by the panchayat of 5 persons, annually elected by the adult villagers, male or female, possessing minimum prescribed qualifications. These will have all the authority and jurisdiction required. Since there will be no system of punishment in the accepted sense, the panchayat will be the legislature, judiciary and executive combined to operate for its year of office." So, for Gandhi then, panchayat or the idea of panchayat, which he called a rule of 5 persons, was totally in I would say synergy with the idea of a village republic or the self-sufficient village community. About exact functions of panchayat, Gandhi writes as late as 1948, 4th January, and if I am not wrong, Gandhi was shot dead on 30th of January 1948. So, the beginning of this month he writes in his journal Harijan about functions of panchayat. What does he write? "It is the function of panchayat to revive honesty and industry, It is the function of the panchayats to teach the villagers to avoid disputes if they have to settle them. This will ensure speedy justice without an expenditure. You will need neither the police nor the military. Then the panchayat should see to cattle improvement. They should show steady increase in the mile yield. The panchayat should also see to an increase in the quantity of foodstuff grown in the village. You should banish intoxicating drinks and drugs from your midst. I hope you will eradicate untouchability if there is any trace of it still in your village. The Hindus, the Muslims, the Sikhs, the Parsis and the Christians should all live as brothers and sisters. If you achieve all I have mentioned, you will demonstrate real independence, and people from all over India will come to see your model village and take inspiration from it. But since people are the basis of this panchayat, Gandhi also talked about the need to educate the people. Maybe it was to take care of the charge of rampant illiteracy in India's villages raised by the modernists like Ambedkar. Gandhi wrote once again in Harijan of 1947 that, I quote, "The greater the power of the panchayat, the better for the people. Moreover, panchayat to be effective and efficient, the level of people's education has to be considerably raised. I do not conceive the increase in the power of the people in the military, but in moral terms." And we may make mention here of an expression Gandhi used, Nai Talim, and Nai Talim was Gandhi's idea of what education should be, having a very important and very great moral content. From 20s when he came to India till 48, Gandhi held on to his ideas of a independent village republic to be ruled over, to be controlled, guided and directed by a panchayat elected by the people of the village themselves. And the practice of and the institution of panchayat, which we have found to be in existence since the days of Rig Veda and down the ages, inspired Gandhi to think of panchayat as the basic unit of rule which guarantees popular participation and leads to real democracy and real republic in India. But unfortunately, his ideas did not find mention in the constitution text as it was originally made, till we came to the 73rd Amendment Act, which to some extent restored or gave Gandhi's ideas a place in reality, and panchayats have become, despite its faults and mistakes or despite what critics may point out, panchayat has become one of the most important tier of governance in India today.